Hey, welcome to the Commerce Hero Show. I am joined today by Brian Essig, president and founder of Creating Digital. Brian, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, living the dream. See that? See that on the shirt for everybody following along by audio. I got this great new T-shirt that says "Living the Dream" on it. So Brian, tell us a little bit about your background, what your company does, and then we'll get into the topic for the day.
Sure. So, Creating Digital is a boutique web development agency. We're located in Hoboken, New Jersey, which is right across the river from New York City. We basically do Magento for e-commerce, Laravel for custom application development, and WordPress for brochure style sites.
Very
My
good.
background with Magento, I've been working with it since about early 2009. We picked up a site to build out an e-commerce engine for a lab parts manufacturer. And since then, we've been working with Magento.
Very good, very good. And I think you had the idea for this topic, which was sort of to talk about developer communication skills, or sort of skills or best practices for developers to sort of communicate better. Was that the idea?
Yeah, so obviously owning the business, dealing with developers in-house and remote, as well as developers who might be at a client location, dealing with the clients, the e-commerce managers. Communication's a really, really big part of every single day. So I thought I could share some tips and some highlights that could be very, very useful to a lot of your audience.
Beautiful. And what does your team look like? Just to give kind of a sense, the size of your team, in-house, subcontractors. Like what do you? How do you guys roll?
Yeah, so we're pretty much just under 15, the majority of which are full-time employees. Um, and that breaks down to being engineer heavy. And then we have about 3 designers and 2 account managers.
Beautiful, beautiful. Do you make it in? Do you make it into New York City? Like, do you have a lot of clients where you have to cross the river, go into the city for meetings and stuff like that?
So we do have a lot of clients in New York City. We actually have more clients in New York than we do in New Jersey.
Hmm.
Typically, as far as client meetings on site, we're probably meeting during the sales cycle maybe once, and then maybe doing like a yearly meeting once or twice, just a good face-to-face time, hash out any really big projects, or maybe at the start of the year really accomplish how well they did in the holiday season, what they're looking for to accomplish in kind of Q1, Q2, moving into Q3, and how to build that momentum from the holiday season, use that all year long, and keep the mistakes that were made fresh in their minds, so that way they can hit the next holiday season even harder.
Very good. Very good. And by the way, if you're watching along in the live chat, feel free to drop any questions you have, whether maybe a scenario where you struggled with communication, or maybe the flip side of it, something maybe a client was crazy and you're like going, how could I have communicated? How could I have possibly communicated that situation better to that wacky client? Any questions you have, feel free to drop them in. We will try to get them answered. So let's jump into it, Brian. What are some of your tips and best practices?
Sure. Well, let's just set up the stage first. So, in a poll of agency clients, they were asked, what's the number one reason for dissatisfaction? Is it programming and technical, a lack of programming and technical prowess? Is it lack of design skills? Or was it lack of planning and service provided? 78% said that it was planning and service. So, planning and
Wow.
service is all about communication, right?
Right.
Uh, some of the words that they used to describe that was overpromised, non-responsive, limited access, poor communication, deadlines, slow, offshoring. But
Hmm.
why is offshoring one problem? You actually drill down into what the issue with offshoring or remote was, it stems from all these communication issues, not from, lack of programming capability, lack of design, et cetera.
Right.
So communication is definitely, massive.
Right. So real quick on this poll, you said it was a poll of agency clients. What is that? What type of a business is that exactly? Like agencies like yours that are hiring?
No, so I took these results from a company called Orbit Media. I
Okay.
stumbled across these maybe a few weeks ago, a few months ago, when I was writing some marketing emails, and they had run the poll. I'm sure if you Google Orbit Media poll or client dissatisfaction, you'll come up with the article, and then that's where I kind of hash those data points from.
Okay. So you're not exactly sure offhand. I'm just Googling that. What type of, like, are these you don't know what type of client
I
agencies
believe
though?
they're end clients, not agencies hiring offshore developers or anything like that. I believe
Got it.
they're marketing managers, small
Oh,
businesses,
agency
e-commerce clients.
clients in the sense clients of agencies. Okay, sorry,
Correct.
my brain is a little slow today. But so the point being that communication is so important, and it's true. I mean, I see it every day. Like you talk about hiring remote, right? And if you want, so you talk about prices for hiring, you're going to pay twice as much to hire somebody local to the U.S. versus hiring remote, right? If not more. And that boils down entirely to communication and time zones. Time zones being basically a sub bullet of communication in the sense that
Exactly.
what times are you available to communicate? And so it's really fascinating because like as much as the industry that we're in is all about the technical skill, I mean that's what it is. It's building software, and yet communication is massive.
It's a
Um,
mess nowadays, and it boils down to we have so many different ways to communicate. Right? We have tools like Asana, Trello, Teamwork, Skype, WhatsApp, all these tools. But really, what are we doing? We're communicating faster than ever before, but we're not communicating as effectively as we were before. We've become worse communicators because of all of these tools.
Yeah. And it's all, this is sort of a side note, but also with everything that's happening in the culture at large around kind of like the way that the polarization of society and things like that. I was thinking about that yesterday. Like we have so much information and yet there's misinformation, there's confusion, there's people that believe entirely different things about just what the facts are, let alone our opinions on the facts. And it's just it's crazy. I mean, if you 30 years ago would have said we're going to have all these tools, all this information, you would imagine that everybody would be on the same page about everything at all times. And it's just sort of not the case. So what are, by the way, real quickly, just to get a little bit more context, for your team, we're talking about communication tools and local, remote, things like that. How is your team structured? Are you guys in the same office? Are you guys remote or a combination of the two?
Combination of the two. So obviously, in-office team, you can do the drive by the chair and speak to somebody. But we use Slack very, very heavily for real-time communication. We use Trello. We're looking at moving into Teamwork. Those are basically our biggest tools. We use a lot of email, unfortunately, to communicate with clients, but internally, we're very Slack heavy.
Okay. Do as far as like talking about communication with clients, and feel free if you want to take this certain direction or you have topics. I know you did some preparation, have some topics. Feel free to take it wherever you want to take it. But I'm curious, in terms of communicating with clients, do you guys have a workflow where everything goes through a project manager? Do you have developers communicate directly with clients? How do you guys structure that?
Yeah, so it's kind of structured based on um, the client or based on the programmer that is assigned to the account. Typically, I find that there's kind of two different types of programmers. There's the head down in the computer screen and we'll crank out, the best code ever. But that, might not be the person you want talking to, your marketing manager at your client side or CEO. So, maybe you want them finishing the task, talking to an account manager, letting the account manager kind of update the client on where we are with things, what remains, what's been pushed live, et cetera. And then we have a couple other programmers who are very well-spoken, very knowledgeable, very polite, come across working with clients, just as well or better than I would. And I don't, get in their way. I let them shine and handle that and don't create this bottleneck in that relationship.
Okay, got it. And so are we mostly focusing on how developers, let's say within an agency, communicate with clients in the case that developers are communicating directly with clients? Are we talking about how developers are communicating within a team, freelancers, all of the above? Which of those categories are we?
Yeah, so a lot of the tips that I'll have are basically geared toward communicating with your coworkers, communicating with clients. Some programmers might be under a project manager and account manager who's client facing. So, some of these tips will help set up that account manager or project manager who may be relaying that information, setting them up for success. So that way they come across knowledgeable and intelligent, and also help eliminate a lot of that back and forth stuff just by some of these simple techniques that I'll share.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get into it. What's tip number one?
Tip number one, let's see. We basically be clear of next steps and who takes them. So whenever you're responding to an email or you're marking a task done or whatever it is, make sure that you've communicated clearly what the next step is. So the best example that I have of this happened 2 weeks ago. We were preparing a Memorial Day slider graphic for a client. And one of our team members was in a rush and communicated via email, attached the slider image and basically said, enclosed is the Memorial Day slider image, and press send on that. The client was waiting for that, right? So when I saw that email come through, I was CC'd on it, and immediately I said to myself, what are the next steps here and who's going to take them? Because from where I'm sitting in the middle, I can see the client side, and the client may be thinking, okay, this is the slider, it's going to go live, and he's going to let me know once it goes live.
Right.
And then on our account manager side, he's going, well, of course, I'm not going to push this live until the client approves it and told me like that this is an acceptable graphic, the design and the messaging are correct and approved, and you can push this live. So there's confusion there. Both sides may be led to believe one thing or the other simply because nobody said anything in the communication. So a much better response for that would be something, along the lines of encloses the Memorial Day slider. I need your approval on the design and messaging. Once we receive your approval, we can schedule to push it live. And once it's live, I'll confirm with you.
Right.
So that way it's very, very clear every step of the process along the way. So
yeah, that's a good, that's a good rule of thumb. Just always have a clear next step, because a lot of times the way that we communicate just in general, like maybe outside of work, is there's certain things that are implied, by, there's just certain things that are imply. You don't necessarily want to always spell out every single thing, like, hey, you want to grab coffee or something, and then you don't want the person to have to, spell out everything exactly. But within this context, I think it's important to just always have a next action item. That's a good one.
Yeah, next action item and who takes it.
And
right?
who takes
a lot
it.
of emails, you can have which is actually leads us to my next tip. State who needs to answer, because in a lot of these emails, we're starting to get emails with 5 people, 10 people, 15 people who are CC'd in them.
Right.
So unless you actually address, hey, Kaylin, comma, I need your approval on this. Kaylin, comma, I need you to send over the product CSV for me.
Right.
If you leave out that Kaylin part and there's 10 people on that email message,
totally different deal.
Even who's going to answer that?
Yeah, and even if there's 2 people on an email thread, and even if you say something like Bob, comma Joe, or Bob slash Joe, can you both tell me XYZ? Because there's not they'll just assume the other person's going to do it, or I don't know what. But there's something very powerful with just having a single person called out for a specific thing in a given email.
Yeah. It's, that person should be called out immediately. The first word, the second word, third word. If it's 3 people, make sure it's there. If you want to break it down, hey, Bob, Amy, Kaylin, see below. Bob,
yeah.
Quote, I need this from you. Amy, I need this from you, etc.
Shows up in the email snippet preview, and it's just clear who needs to do what. It's interesting. I gave myself a note from the last thing you're talking about, which is, talking about who needs to do what. And there was a scenario recently where I was communicating with a developer and the team where they were like, oh, this person didn't get X, Y, and Z done. And then the developer was like, oh, well, I was waiting on something for them. And that happens. I mean, if I could count the number of times I've seen that happen in some form or another, which is developer thinks they're waiting on something, and then the party they're waiting on, whether that's the project manager, the team, the client, thinks that they're waiting on them, right? And then things just don't get done. That kind of thing can happen a lot. Do you run into that scenario? Do you have any specific tips around that?
Yeah, so it's a very common scenario. Unfortunately, it happens here, but the way that we eliminate that, try and reduce that as much as we can, and when it does happen, catch it early, is by those clear calls to action and who's responsible for them, and then following up. So there's no harm in saying, hey, Kaylin, I'm waiting on those 5 links before we can send out the email blast, over and over every 3 days. You might respond back to me and say, okay, I'm going to get those to you. But even, a couple of days later, saying, hey, Kaylin, just a reminder, I'm still waiting on those links before I can proceed. So we have a weekly team meeting where we basically have a log of everybody's open tasks. And because of that, if they're waiting on links from you, as that example, that's going to be an open task for them. And we go through and we communicate, hey, why is this one on hold? Oh, you're waiting for those links. Okay, when's the last time you had client communication from them? It was, if it was more than 2 or 3 days ago, we go, okay, bump that person now. Just let them know that you're still waiting on them. So that way they're clear that they're the delay here, not us. Or we're bumping them and they'll, spam filter ate those links for some reason, or it got moved to our junk message, whatever. And the client says, no, I sent those. Boom, we eliminated however many more days delay. We're only a day or 2 behind schedule now because of this missed email, instead of, 2 weeks down the line, 3 weeks down the line, the client going, hey, why did this never get done?
Yeah. Yeah. And with the stuff that I do, I have kind of a daily follow-up workflow. And it's like, if I email somebody yesterday and it's been 1 business day, they haven't responded, I'm sending a follow-up saying, hey, I'm still waiting on this or whatever. And I think maybe, everybody's somewhere on a spectrum, being very nitpicky and follow-up Nazi about stuff. And some people are much more casual, but I think you do need a level of structure to keep the trains moving on time. Do you guys have any kind of a daily stand-up meeting? I know that's something that a lot of teams like to do.
So we don't do a daily stand-up meeting. We do a weekly one, but in Slack we're very very in tune. And then we have a Slack channel per account,
Mhm.
and then basically the team members assigned to that account are in that channel. So there's constant communication of what's going on in terms of, tasks, support tickets that might come in, urgent matters, everything like that's pretty internally anyway is kept up to date there.
Okay.
So that's how we kind of keep in tune daily and make sure that things aren't slipping through the cracks.
Right. What kind of structures do you have in place for Slack? I mean, you talked about having a separate channel for each account, but beyond that, I'm curious if you have any structure or kind of practices or workflows. I find that Slack can be great for real time feedback, and of course, there's also emails that get kicked out, and there's an asynchronous component to Slack. But I still think of it as being primarily real time, and you've got along, and they have some support for threaded discussions, but they tend to be these long blobs of information, whereas an email can be a lot more actionable, right? Like we talked about sending the single email with the single who's responsible for what, whereas within Slack you've got a conversation that's 8 screens long back and forth. It can sometimes get a little foggy, and then there's the kind of the real-time component to it. Maybe you're interrupting developers workflows, which we know there are a lot of studies around how hard it is to get back into the zone if you're doing development, stuff like that. So I'm just curious how you guys handle Slack in general.
So we have a pretty simple setup. It's pretty much the channels per account. The team members of that account are in that channel. We do have some generic channels, for example, our server monitoring. If there's any alerts or anything like that, that'll go into post an alert in a general channel that all the developers or DevOps guys are in. And then they'll take action on that. We have a Supportly channel, which is our help desk. So when there's tickets that somebody is an owner of that gets updated, there's an @ in Slack, so they're getting a real-time notification that the ticket's been updated. So that way they can just keep track of those things. But yeah, I mean, we've kept it pretty simple. The threaded discussions are something that we don't use that often. And then as far as, those things like you mentioned that get kind of long and over time, we're usually working on those in a Trello card or inside a support ticket in Supportly.
Right. Gotcha. I'm trying to Google Supportly and I can't find it. What's the?
It's Sir, SIRPORTLY. It's by the guys who did Deploy HQ, A Tech Media, I believe, in the UK.
Oh, you said it's Sir S.
Yeah, SIRPORTLY.
Oh, Sir Portly. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
It's like a little self-hosted
I thought it was
help scout.
I thought it was supportly, like support. I was
Nope, Sir. And then they have this funny little icon of this guy with a mustache, maybe? I forget. I know.
What is that? What does Sir Portly mean? As it I don't get it. That's cool.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So
sorry. I was just
one
curious.
thing we do a lot, whether it be in Slack or email with each other, which is another tip, is we're always confirming our conversations. So a great example of this is I messaged one of our account managers the other day to update a client spreadsheet that I needed updated. And I gave him the task and I said, I need it by tomorrow, 3 p.m., whatever. And he, immediately, which still was like 10, 15 minutes later when he got back to Slack and looking at his messages, but he wrote to me, yes, I got this confirmed. And so at that point, right, I know he got my message. There's no doubt that, Slack crashed or froze on him, or he didn't check Slack for the afternoon, or he, went to Starbucks and and stopped working for the day or whatever. I knew he got the task. I knew he acknowledged the deliverable deadline that he had, and I knew it was going to get done. There wasn't, besides that 10, 15, 20-minute period where, you know, maybe he went outside for fresh air or whatever it was. I knew relatively immediately that he was taking ownership of that task, and he was in charge of it. So, you know, always confirm. That goes through email as well. When you get a message from somebody, whether it's a client, coworker, if you reply back and say, "Hey, I received this," even if you're not able to take actionable steps to resolve whatever the email is, just saying, "Hey, I received this. I need some time to process and look into this. I'll get back to you the beginning of next week." It just lets the client know, "Hey, my email got received. They're going to look at it. I can expect to hear back from them early next week." And, you know, clients are very, very quick to let you know if early next week doesn't jive with them. They will reply right back, "Hey, was hoping to get this looked at today or this week or by Thursday," or whatever timeline they had in their head. But your initial response just gauges, "Hey, you know, we're an actual agency. We have actual employees. We care about you as a client. We're going to respond to you. This is when you can expect to hear from us next about your issue." It doesn't even guarantee resolution by that time. It just says that we're going to look at it, gather our thoughts, come up with a game plan. A lot of those simple issues that, you know, there's a cross-browser bug, whatever the case is, yeah, a lot of the times those are solved by the follow-up time that we set. But it just lets the client know what to expect.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing worse than just not getting, you know, not getting any kind of feedback whatsoever. And so so how do you balance that out with, you know, if you're wanting, let's say, your team to respond within a few minutes or whatever to kind of confirm receipt of the task? How do you balance that out with if somebody wants to go into the zone for 4 hours and just do some coding? Do you ask?
So we don't require that they respond in few minutes time. But for us as a company, our goal is to respond in 8 business hours. So, you know, that's pretty much letting a client know within 8 business hours that their task has been received, and hopefully an idea of when to hear back next. So we're confirming and we're letting them know when to hear back. In Supportly, we have what's called SLAs, so tickets that don't get an initial response within 8 hours. Our team gets pinged that these tickets are, you know, past their SLA time, and basically bumps us and lets us know, "Hey, we haven't communicated with these clients yet. Let's look at these tickets and get that out." So that way they know we care about them. We received their issue. It's not in a black hole, and we're good to go. So that's how we kind of handle that is, you know, if the developer wants to go in the zone for 4 hours, 6 hours, even 8 hours, all we ask from them is, you know, your tickets, the ones that you've been assigned to or account manager is kind of like putting in your queue. Just take a quick look at them before or after and just give the account manager like an expectation of when, you know, you can either update the ticket or let the account manager know an expectation of when you think you can get to that in your schedule and what length of work and how complicated it is. So that way they're set up for success of communicating accurately and precisely to the end client.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like the 8 business hours thing. I usually will say 1 business day, and for all intents and purposes, it's generally 8 business hours because I usually batch my stuff at kind of the same time every day. But I like having that as sort of your SLA to clients. Because, you know, if somebody emails you the beginning of the day and you respond end of day the next day, it's almost like 2 days have passed. Even though it's 1 business day. So it's a cool standard. How do you kick that ping out when you get past the 8 business hour mark? Do you kick to cell phones or just another email?
So that one goes through email. so that pings people through email. But the good thing or bad thing, I think it's a good thing, is that's a cron that runs every hour. So you're going to get bothered every hour after the 8 hours, unless somebody takes action on the ticket. So those tickets get action taken on them very quick.
Nice.
Pinging too many people on the team for too long that everybody would get too frustrated with it. So when one of those alerts come through very infrequently, especially now as the team's kind of gotten used to that. But when an alert for that comes through, somebody usually hops on it right away.
Right. That's cool. I was actually talking to somebody recently about an issue they had with a task that kind of slipped through the cracks, and it was a relatively small one, but it just didn't get done for like 2 weeks. And I was talking to them about, maybe getting some kind of a dashboard set up within their project management software to help highlight those. So that's cool that you guys have some logic in place for that. Do you guys have any other custom logic in place for notifications or any kind of dashboards to look at, task resolution times or client satisfaction or anything like that?
So one thing that Supportly has is it'll show us like task resolution time. It'll show us open tickets. We can add follow-ups to stuff. So for example, we had a client that gave us specific assets to be scheduled to be put up, like, the Thursday before Memorial Day, the 2 days before 4th of July, and 2 days before Memorial Day. And to the client, they wanted to set and forget that, right? They handed that off to us, and they're like, you know what, you guys figure out how to get this done. Don't let me find out 2 days after the holiday that this never got done, right? That happens a lot. So what's really cool in that ticket in Supportly, we just added the follow-ups. We added 3 follow-ups a few days before the holidays and the time that they wanted it done. And those tickets will reopen themselves and ping us on Supportly and be an open ticket in our system for somebody to hop on all of those dates. So we were able to take that ticket, set it, and forget it.
That's cool.
So we use that functionality a lot. Those small tasks are always the hardest. Clients, when those slip through.
Well, not always. There's some big tasks that are hard too, like flying to Mars is a big task that's kind of difficult.
But, like I tell my team, if the client can't trust us with the small things, how are they going to trust us with the big things? So the small things are very important. It's important to get those right. And the biggest piece of those small tasks is usually the communication about receiving that task, setting expectations for when it's going to get done, following up when it is either on staging, ready to go live, when it has been pushed live, closing the loop. If you fail in that communication gap anywhere along the spectrum on those small tasks, that makes the client just as angry as if a big task fell through.
Yeah. You almost have to have some system in place for catching small tasks. Like I love that thing you have with the 8-hour ping, because by the nature of a small task, it's something that isn't, well, let's say it's small and it's also not extremely important. It's not super urgent. I mean, it needs to get done. And by the nature of that kind of task, it's not it's important to the client. It's not super duper important, like somebody's bleeding. And it's also not that important to you guys. So it's not something that you're naturally going to remember, like an important deadline or a holiday sale or a go live. So it's something that you're likely to not remember if you don't have a system for it. And even though it's not super important, if you don't get it done, you just drop it for 2 weeks, it just looks really bad. It's like, I asked you to do this simple thing 2 weeks ago, you didn't get it done. So you kind of have to have a system for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And let's talk real quick about, why some of those things fall through the cracks. And, we saw it, and I try and train my team. Done is a 4-letter word. Don't use it unless you mean it. right?
It's
So, like,
done you.
how many times does an account manager ask a developer, like, "Hey, is that thing done?" The developer says yes,
Right. They're
and
like,
then the account
yeah.
manager tells the client it's done, and the client's like, "That's not live." Well, and then the account manager goes back to dev, and dev's like, "Well, no, I'm done
Well, it's
programming the
done,
task,
but it's not live. Yeah.
but
I'm done thinking about it.
like done to me means four very, very specific things. It means the tasks are completed, documentation's been made, tickets are cleared up. It means the second thing, the client has reviewed and approved it. The third thing, the task has been released and pushed to production. And the most important thing, the last most important thing, the client has been notified. Here's why, and
Right.
this goes with anything. If you get an urgent support ticket, okay, and you see that ticket within 30 seconds, you're on it. Within 120 seconds, you've fixed this issue, right? But you failed to notify the client, and
They
somebody
could be all
catches it
kinds of pissed off, and you
eight
already got
hours
it done.
later.
Yeah.
You email the client 8 hours later. Oh, by the way, I fixed this morning right when it came in. Like
Right.
the client's like,
Damage has been done.
okay, but you
Yeah.
know, like if you'd fix that in 2 minutes and you're emailing them 3 minutes, boom, they get a little Outlook notification like, hey, not even we're looking into this, but like, hey, I fixed this. You're a superhero. But if you fail to notify the client, like you may as well not have jumped on that ticket right away. You may as well not
Yeah.
have interrupted your workflow, because
Yeah.
for all the client knows is that, you didn't do it till after lunch,
Right.
like they don't know.
Right.
So if you
Yeah.
don't close that loop, you're not done yet.
Yeah. It's the difference between superhero and sort of crappy is like just sending that trivial update back to them. Do you guys have what kind of a system do you have in place? If I'm the developer, I get the ticket, I push it live, I finish it, I mark it complete. Is that going to automatically notify the client? Or are you in a separate project management system that the client doesn't have access to? So you have to notify them elsewhere as well?
So it's a mix. We have some clients that we have client-facing portals with, whether that be Trello cards for long-term projects, moving into teamwork for other things, and then obviously support tickets for us are more quick tasks, more support related. So like, hey, customer called in and complained and said the shipping rates were totally off what they should be, or customer called in and complained about the checkout process. Here's what they said. Those are kind of things where we're looking at live sites and kind of investigating things. So depending on kind of the means in which the client's communicating with us might dictate kind of if the developer's closing out the task and they're automatically getting notified about that. So yeah.
Got it. Got it. Cool. Um, all right. Do you measure client satisfaction at all? Do you have any like, NPS that you do or?
Yeah, so I know some support systems like have the how was my response and green thumbs up, red thumbs up. That's not currently built into Supportly that I am aware of. I don't know if they've added that to a newer version, and we just haven't turned it on yet. But we basically are not right now. And then NPS is something that we're thinking of doing, and then we're looking at there's like this testimonial provider. We actually looked at this last week, and it was pretty cool because customers could leave feedback and stuff, and then they could also like click the little webcam icon and create like a video testimonial for you or video feedback,
Oh, cool.
which could work out great for portfolio pages and stuff like that for the website. So we were thinking of doing that in the very short term.
Got it. Yeah, it's interesting with NPS. Like it's interesting to me. I haven't used it a ton myself in the past, and I noticed when when sites ask me, for the 1 to 10 rating, it sometimes like slightly annoys me a tiny bit. So it's funny in the process of trying to measure your client satisfaction, you might be decreasing it slightly.
Yeah,
Although NPS is a surprisingly good metric, as simple as it is, and it's
yeah,
probably something to.
and I think it works really great for like product-based businesses. I think it works well for um, service productized businesses like web hosting and things like that, where you kind of have a broad base. I think agencies measure retention rate a lot,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is a really good indicator of how well they're doing. So we've been very, very fortunate to have a really high retention rate. We've been fortunate enough to have really, really strong word of mouth referrals from existing clients. We've had a lot of e-commerce managers or contacts in companies leave and get new jobs and bring their new employers over as clients. So these things kind of let us know and reinforce to our staff when we see familiar faces pop up over and over again that, hey, we're doing a good job. We've also had a crazy. We have a very high retention rate, like 92%, something like that. But
Oh wow.
we have this other weird stat where in the last like 3 years we've lost something like 7 clients for whatever reason. Either they shut down business or they moved to another agency, whatever the case was. And just under half, so about 3, have come back after working with another agency.
There you go.
Grass greener on the other side didn't turn out to be so. And they were happy to come to us. And in one of those cases, they actually left because the other agency was charging them more. So there was a perceived value that they were going to receive that they weren't receiving from us. And then when they went there, they were not getting the perceived value. They were actually getting a less value than we were offering. And they came back and we had a talk about raising rates just so they could feel better.
There you go. There's nothing better than having somebody leave and come back.
Yeah,
So, well, I guess it's
it
better if they
helps
never leave in
reinforce.
the first place, but
Exactly.
it
But
certainly is.
sometimes they bring some good insights with them. You're able to have a open discussion about maybe another agency sales cycle, what things brought them there in the first place, and then you're able to hit those things head on and correct them and obviously improve.
Right. So 92%, that's a pretty impressive retention rate. And how long have you guys been in business?
2009. So we have January will be 10 years.
Wow, that's fantastic. I just got, I don't know if I have it here. Ah, I just got a man, I should have had it. I just got a t-shirt from Inchu. Inchu recently hit their 10-year anniversary and they did these t-shirts. Been doing Magento for 10 years. I need a beer, so I need something to drink or something like that. And anyway, I managed to get one. They sent it to me. I've only been doing Magento for coming up on 7 years, so I'm an honorary 10-year T-shirt member. But I got to get that. So, anyways, that's amazing. I mean, about 10 years in business, 92% retention rate. That sounds too good. That sounds a little suspect. You said it was like a 92% rate. Is that the actual retention rate? That's really good.
uh, let's see. We have a spreadsheet. We had someone that was helping us with some marketing stuff, and she put it together. And yeah, I think there's like some exclusions from there. Like if the business closed down, then that's not like we lost the accounts. I think those are excluded. I think that's probably the only caveat.
Gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Very good. Very, very good. TJ's making fun of me in the live chat there. And it's interesting with satisfaction. You talked about how a lot of times that can make more sense for a product that you're using versus an agency. I find that, and even with Commerce Hero, people that are hiring freelancers or even employees or agencies, whatever it is, at the end of the day, they're human beings, they're people. that change from day to day, and dynamics change, rates change, go up and down, expertise changes as you're learning more, or perhaps falling behind the curve as technology is changing. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, somebody can be satisfied initially, or after a few months or a year, but maybe a few years into it, the client's like, I don't know. Maybe they want to put feelers out. Maybe they think the grass is greener. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's an interesting thing how that sort of ebbs and flows over time.
Yeah, it's agency life is very much about relationships and personalities. Um, you have to very well balance that. Um, I see and talk to and interview developers who you can tell might be suited working for a big company like Microsoft or Avantage or ADT payroll or whomever it is, that is a much larger entity where they're going to be a number on a developer team answering to a project manager who answers to a product manager who answers to whatever level. The stairs keep going up and up and up. And then there's people who are built for the much smaller agency lifestyle, where you're probably one person or zero people from hitting production code.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's interesting. TJ mentioned that in the chat that the industry churn rate. He said, I want to say the industry churn rate is 18 to 20% in revenue, which obviously he's not quoting any hard numbers there. TJ, we need a source on that. So I don't know if that's a yearly churn rate in revenue, in which case, I mean, 10 years, 92% retention rate is still is pretty incredible.
Well, so he's talking about revenue there, but clients can have peaks and valleys in terms of years, right? Year one, somebody builds out a new Magento build that could be X thousands of dollars. Year two on maintenance and support and ad hoc enhancements and things like that could be smaller buckets. But I think one of the metrics that I've heard before is like the average agency client is about 3 years. So if you have a client that is with you longer than 3 years, that's pretty good. If you lose a client in less than 3 years, that's less than the average standard. So that's one benchmark that I've heard shared with among agency owners before.
Gotcha. Cool. Any other tips that we have on the list there?
I think we covered them all. Just the last thing is, be the light, be the leader. You're going to try and improve communication, and you'll get responses from coworkers and clients that, don't answer all the questions that you asked, and, make it feel like a struggle, an uphill battle. But, be strong, use these tips, communicate well in Slack, communicate well in email, communicate well in the ticket system, and people will notice, clients will notice, your coworkers will notice, and you'll help improve your communication. You could help decrease the number of emails you're dealing with every day. I always like to tell people, if we could increase communication by 10%, what would that mean for you as a person? Does that mean, you would get in a 40-hour work week, you'd get another 4 hours for programming? In terms of revenue, would you get X% more of revenue? What would that mean for you? So just using some or all of these tips will hopefully, save you some time in the week, hopefully save some retention in terms of clients, and overall help out the agency you're working for and make you a better developer.
Very good. Very good. I have a question. What do you look for when interviewing developers? What do you look for in terms of communication? Any particular questions that you have, or kind of traits that you look for?
Yeah. So communication for us is a big thing when we're hiring developers. We usually do an initial phone screen. And so in that phone screen, we're judging, you know, if this person had to walk a customer through a technical issue, how well would they do? Are they, you know, courteous? Are they professional? Do they come off as having confidence that, you know, do they talk in a way that, you know, admits that this problem is going to get solved when I'm on the phone with you right now? Are they clear and easy to understand? Do they, you know, are they talking very mumbled? Are they talking very low? Those are all things that we look, and that's one of the first contacts that we have with any interviewee. Next thing that we look at is we'll start moving the conversation through email, and we'll start looking at, you know, if we asked them 5 or 6 things in an email, did they answer all of our things, or did they only answer 4 of the 6 or 5 of the 6? Did they actually answer all of the things? And if they didn't have an answer for one of the things, did they state, I don't have an answer for this? Because to us, you know, answering things thoroughly is super important. Then we look at the grammar, the structure of the email, things like that. We know we have guys that work here who English is not their first language. So we're not looking for, you know, perfect English, perfect grammar, but we are looking for, is it clear? Is it understandable? Does it embody that confidence that the person who's responding to this email knows what they're talking about and is going to be able to fix the issue? And then we do, we obviously at some point move to a face-to-face interview. Typically that's in person. And in that interview, we understand candidates, you know, obviously interviews stressful for most people. But we look at, you know, all the signs of whether this person could sit in a room with a client and be good. You know, are they very nervous? Are they, you know, tripping over their words? Are they, is there some type of nervous tic? Are they sweating a whole bunch in the interview? Like, what's going on? Like, you know, we have to make sure that whoever we're going to put in front of our clients, we would want in front of our clients if we weren't there. So that way, when there is an urgent issue and we have to say, hey, you need to take care of this, you need to call the client, you're the one that has to have full ownership of this. We're going to be ready and know and trust that they're going to contact the client. The client is going to be thoroughly, you know, satisfied that they're handling the issue.
Yeah. Yeah. But then you also said you have developers that aren't client facing. So just, you'd have less, like, you'd be less concerned about some of those things if they weren't going to be client facing.
Yeah. So at that point, it comes to communication internally. So if we're asking a technical question, how well do they communicate that to our other developers? Are they able to break down, you know, the steps of what they did to rectify an issue, or the steps of why they're doing things programmatically in Magento or Laravel or whatever framework they do have experience in. So they have to be able to explain why they're doing things and the steps that they're doing them in. So that way we know, okay, this isn't just, you know, copied and pasted from GitHub and thrown together to look like a project that they did and they're handing it over to us, but we want them to actually explain why. So we'll jump into some code samples and we'll go on a Zoom call with candidates and be like, hey, we noticed in this file on this line here, you have this function. Can you tell us a little bit about what this function does? And on one of those calls, we purposely actually went into the framework file. So we know the person didn't write it. They were actually calling the function from a controller, but we went into the framework file and we asked them, hey, why are you using this function? Like, this is the function right here on screen. Tell us what it does. And it was some function for sanitizing database input and all this stuff. And they answered that perfectly. They said, oh, you know, I didn't write this as a part of the framework, but this is why you use it and this is what it does. and how it works. And, you know, that's a perfect answer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting with communication. I think sometimes about um, developers who English isn't their first language, maybe offshore or whatever. I'm almost think it would be kind of cool to figure out how to teach communication skills uh, to them, because I think there's a lot of opportunity there where the technical skill is there, and if you could help them with communication, I think that might help a lot. And it's interesting. I think there's communication, and then there's also maybe business culture and expectations and things like that, and expectations around being honest or being direct, right, about an answer to a question versus sort of just saying yes, saying what, I think there's certain cultures and business cultures in which there's different standards there. And I don't know if that falls under communication or not, but I think
well, I can give an example of when, you know, that falls in the communication. You kind of said it, like when saying yes to things and stuff like that. So one thing that I teach the guys is, like, don't say no to the client. Like, the client might give a really tough deadline. Hey, I want these 5 things done, and I'd like them done for Friday. Or worse, the client demands are done for Friday, right? Hey, we have this media campaign. We're going to be on the news. All this stuff has to be done by Friday, right? And it's just impossible. So you can't go back to the client and say what they need done is impossible. But what you do is you evaluate, what is it that they're asking me to do, but why are they asking me to do it? Okay, they need these landing pages because of this media coverage they're having, whatever the case is. So what could be an acceptable alternative that we can give them by the date that they need, and ultimately work toward that long-term goal? So, okay, the client, I need these 5 landing pages done for Friday because we're starting media spend. Okay, well, we can't do that. So let's activate, version A first. We'll get that done, fully tested, launched by Thursday. So it's well ready in advance of Friday for you to test and have in production and ready to go. And then we'll start working on the other versions, and we'll push those live as we get them ready. So they'll become hot incrementally. So that way, you're solving that business problem, and you're coming up with a solution that will hopefully work for everybody. And I can't tell you how many times, like, we've done that, and there's almost no friction. The client's super happy because ultimately what they needed in their business to get done by that date is getting done by that date. What they wanted for their business by that date is going to get done shortly after that date.
Yeah.
And they see the hurdles, and they're very appreciative that we understand, what's going on in their business, and we're able to kind of, help them readjust their goals, and it's a win-win.
That's a good approach. So much of the time, I think when working with clients, it can kind of be like they do what they tell you to do, and if you can't, it's like, I can't. Versus like trying to understand, hey, what are their goals? There's a media campaign. There's a lot of money that's going to be spent. We got to do something. We got to find something to do. So instead of yes, no, it's like, how can we help you to accomplish? And nobody can do miracles. I mean, there's certain things that just can't be done. But what I like that approach of just don't, instead of saying no, suggest an alternative. You have some good rules of thumb. I like some of these rules of thumb that you have. Don't say no. The other one that you said, the thing with done, don't say done. I like that one.
4-letter word.
Yeah, 4-letter word. You have some good nuggets here. I really like this.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it, Brian. So if there's any last parting shots you have, you can drop those in here, or also otherwise, where can people find you online?
So Brian_Essig on Twitter. You can check out our company, creatingdigital.com. I'm wearing the t-shirt, which is probably too low from the video the whole time, but that's all right. So reach out, let me know what you thought about the tips. And I look forward to engaging with a bunch of you.
Awesome. Thanks, man. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.